Okay, guys, good morning. Today in science, we're going to look at traits and heredity. We're going to do a couple readings, and there's going to be some questions around the traits and heredity. Okay, so this is variation of traits, this first reading. So it says when two organisms create a third organism through reproduction, a number of variables come into play. It's sort of a complex lottery in which a third organism, the offspring of the first two, inherits a combination of the parent's organism's genetics material. The possible variations inherent in recombining the parent's DNA are very broad and infinitely larger than the pool of entries in the state lotto jackpot. That's why we get so many variations, even within the population of a particular sexually reproducing species. Each new organism receives two sets of chromosomes, and with those two chromosomes, two versions of each parent set of genes. These genes contain instructions for protein production within the body of the offspring, and the way those proteins are prescribed determines the traits of the offspring. So, although your unique collection of traits, the combination of characteristics, physical and otherwise, make uniquely yourself, are originally the product of chance. There are machinations going on behind the scenes to which every freckle and hair and character can be traced. Okay. So we talked about this in last class. You know, some of us get a combination of our parents' hair color, eye color, height, freckles, things like that. So we're going to look a little bit about heredity right now. And this talks about personality traits, our story altogether. When you think about how our personalities are formed, we can certainly think about genes we acquire from our parents. We also have to think about the complexity, intertwined factors like environment and upbringing. For now, we'll simplify things by just focusing on the physical aspects of inherited traits. For example, if both parents exhibit the trait of red hair, the offspring have a greater chance of acquiring the genes that code for red hair. Certain traits are dominant or recessive depending on the makeup of their alleles. This can make predicting traits tricky, but still very possible to estimate the likelihood that even the mathematical probability that certain traits will manifest in the offspring of partners who exhibit those traits. But a lot of times our hair color is the same as our parents, maybe the eye color, not always. And we looked at that, in the last lesson. A lot of it has to depend on the recessive and dominant traits. So this one says red hair happens to be a kind of gene called incomplete dominant, which means it will blend with other genes rather than dominate or be dominated. Since this is the case, the likeliest candidate to be coded for red hair in the offspring is two red-headed parents. It would be very, very unlikely for two parents with identically coded chromosomes to sexually produce, even in the case of infamilial pairings, which are discouraged in our society. The chromosome pairings would never be perfectly identical. It's a good thing for us as a civilization. As you will see, the worst thing for our survival is to be paired with likes. It's the best interest of our population that lots of different genes get mixed together in an evolutionary soup so that many new variations of living organisms can be exposed to the environment, develop new adaptations and changing conditions, and promote the survival of the species. Another variable that lets organism populations adapt to a changing environment is mutation in genes. Sometimes unpredictable changes in genetic code will appear with a new generation, not traceable back to a parental source. It says creators of superheroes like the X-Men and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles have used this idea of extreme mutation as a narrative device to invent colorful characters, bizarre scenarios, and a litany of metaphors. Mutant and mutation have exciting, exotic connotations to us, but actually mutation is simply a necessary part of species evolution. Mutations can be something as mundane as two parents with brown eyes giving birth to a child with hazel eyes, or a type of moth whose wings are a different color from all of the moths in that species. Mutations are where new adaptations to existing or dynamic conditions in a field are tested in competition to whatever's worked for a population in the past. If a mutation pops up that happens to be advantageous for a particular organism, even within a population, that organism is more likely to survive and therefore more likely to procreate. Eventually, that chance mutation is reflected more widely in the community and is passed on further to later generations. Once new challenges appear in the environment, new adaptations are likely to crop up for a fortunate few. Okay, it's not to say mutations are always helpful. Sometimes they're simply inconvenient, odd, or unsupportable. They can even be indicative of disruption in the environment. Human interference in genetic coding is a pretty common practice these days. By deliberately engineering mutations in plants, most often food crops, humans can create larger, more resilient food sources. Since these superfoods are synthetically equipped with adaptations to make them more disproportionately competitive in the ecosystem they share with naturally grown food crops, and they pose a threat to this population. This is a controversial practice that many food activists are working to curb. An example of this is sometimes the corn today, genetically modified, so the corn grows bigger, the cobs are bigger, there's more pieces on it. But what that does, it kind of overtakes kind of the natural corn. I was younger, corn wasn't as big as it is today. And that's because they've genetically modified it. Because obviously farmers, if they're growing bigger corn, they may make more money for it. And I think sometimes you guys might see that with chickens too. They genetically modify the chicken. A lot of times they give it like a hormone or a steroid. That's why sometimes when you go to the store, you see sometimes when you buy like 2 chicken breasts, they're just humongous. And that's just genetically modified. Chickens aren't meant to be that big, but obviously if you're a farmer and your chickens are bigger, and they basically sell, chicken breasts by the pound, you're going to make more money. And that's really it's like a genetically modified chicken. And this says whether mutation occurs naturally or is forced upon a population by biogenetics. Scientists' mutations are essential to the system by which ecosystems change and grow. Okay. Sometimes it happens with us, like they said. Sometimes we get, a gene that neither one of our parents has. It's through a mutation. So that does happen sometimes in humans. Okay. So there's going to be some questions here. So these are just what determines the traits of the offspring. You can go back up and look at these. I think there's 8 or 9 questions here. Let me see here. 10. And then you can see the answers are all right here. Okay, so if you want to check yourself, you can do that. And then there's one more reading about heredity, and this is about Gregor Mendel. And he's famous today for groundbreaking investigations discovering the field of genetics. His P-plant experiments in the 19th century explained concepts such as dominant allies and recessive allies. Mendel concluded the experiments with 2 laws, the law of segregation and the law of independent assortment. And these are just some terms: heredity, genetics, hybrid, gene, allies, law of segregation, law of independent assortment. And this talks about kind of his experiment a little bit. And, you don't necessarily need to know this, but Mendel's name might be mentioned on the test, and it's just about heredity. So you can just kind of look this over, and this talks about some of the experiments. This talks about his results, and this is another experiment. So it just talks about the 2 experiments that he did. That's all I have for today. You guys will continue, I guess, on Thursday with genetics. Hopefully this helps. And like I said, you can certainly try to answer those questions first, and then you can go and check your answers afterwards. All right, I'm going to start social studies here in about 15 minutes. Everyone have a wonderful day, and I'll talk to you soon.